This last weekend, this channel hit 420,000 subscribers, which is like crazy, man. I mean, I just hit 400,000 subscribers like just a few weeks ago. It's like time is like slowing down or something. So I've had a lot of people ask me to do a video about marijuana versus alcohol, so I figured, you know, this is a good excuse as any. So I say sit back, pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side, and let's talk about weed. Marijuana legalization has been one of the unexpectedly fastest growing movements in the United States over the last 10 years. I mean, not that long ago, such a thing was considered crazy. Like the only people who were in favor of it were old hippies, hacky sack players, and Woody Harrelson. But today, at the time of this recording, 10 states have fully legalized all forms of cannabis, and 21 have actually approved it for medical use. That means 3/5 of the country now has some kind of legal marijuana. And one of the biggest claims that pro-marijuana people put out there is that marijuana is actually safer than alcohol, and alcohol is legal and you can find it everywhere you go. But how true is that statement? Let's take a look, starting with alcohol. So there's a few different types of alcohols out there. There's ethanol, methyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and butanol. Ethanol is what you'll find in your favorite libation. Ethanol is water soluble, which means it kind of has the skeleton key to your body. It can just go wherever it wants, and it gets around quickly. Within minutes of consuming it, it's entered the bloodstream, it makes its way to the heart that pumps the party all around the body, so it actually goes everywhere, but it's when it gets to your brain that you get turned. Because ethanol is a nervous system depressant, this kind of numbs your nerves a little bit, dulls them. This means all of your senses get dulled a little bit, including sight, sound, and touch specifically. But when it gets to your brain, there's a few more subtle things that it does up there, and it involves neurotransmitters. Okay, neurotransmitters are something that's going to come up over and over and over again in this thing, so I feel like we should all kind of get on the same page here. So your brain cells, the neurons, they have to communicate with each other, and they do that through axons and dendrites. Axons are where the information goes out, dendrites is where they take it in, so it's like input-output. And these dendrites and axons meet at these little junctures called synapses. And synapses are these tiny gaps in between the dendrite and the axon, where the axon kind of floods the dendrite with a stew of different amino acid molecules, these neurotransmitters, and along the edge of the dendrite, along the surface there's all these little receptors that are kind of like locks, and the molecules of amino acids are the key that kind of fit into those locks. And it's through this chemical signaling that information is carried. There's literally dozens of neurotransmitters out there, but there's 7 main ones with names that you've probably heard before, like serotonin, dopamine, histamines, that kind of thing. Each of them serve a different purpose and affect a different cognitive and sensory function. So for most recreational drugs, this is kind of how they do what they do, by adjusting the amount of these different types of neurotransmitters. Alcohol, for example, boosts the production of dopamine, which gives you feelings of joy and euphoria. But it also binds to glutamate. Now, glutamate is something that normally stimulates neurons, but when alcohol binds with it, it can't fit into those receptors on the dendrites like they're supposed to, which actually slows down the function of the cells. It also binds to the neurotransmitter GABA, which makes you feel tired or sleepy, but unlike glutamine, which makes it more difficult for it to fit into those receptors, it actually makes GABA easier to fit into those receptors, so that just enhances the calming effect. Alcohol, of course, metabolizes in the liver at the rate of around 1 fluid ounce per hour, and of course, over time, this can do damage to the liver. But the real danger from alcohol is that it can eventually shut down portions of your brain, which can lead to unconsciousness, but at a high enough level, it can actually shut down the part of your brain that handles very important tasks like, you know, heartbeat and breathing, or it can cause you to aspirate, which basically means you choke on your own vomit. So that's the downside. All right, now let's talk about marijuana, or cannabis, Mary Jane, weed, dope, chronic, the wacky tobacco, the flibbity floobity, reefer, ganja, the Rocky Mountain High. It goes by many names. People call it different names because it's illegal, or it has been until recently. When something's illegal, you gotta be a little sneaky about it. Cannabis is listed by the DEA as a Schedule I drug, which means it has no medicinal benefits and a high potential for abuse. By the way, some people use the word cannabis when talking about this. Some people use the word marijuana. There's a lot of different opinions on which one is right. I think in general, though, cannabis sort of covers the whole category of chemicals known as cannabinoids, which are called that because they interact with our own endocannabinoid system. More on that in a minute. Whereas marijuana is the term that you actually use for the actual plant or extract. And you can go down a whole rabbit hole with this because there's a lot of people that think that the word marijuana was basically just made up by law enforcement and government in the 30s when they were trying to make it illegal. They were trying to make it sound scarier by giving it a Mexican name, so you know, there's a nice little dollop of racism in there. So I'll try to stick with the word cannabis from here on out because I am talking about the cannabinoid chemicals and how they interact in our body, and the two main ones of that being tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, or cannabidiol, or CBD. And in a quick nutshell, THC gets you high, CBD doesn't. THC is an activator for the CB1 receptor, which is involved in our reward pathways in the brain. So it makes us feel good, but it also makes us kind of want to reward ourselves, usually with junk food. It also increases blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, which kind of creates a whole stew of thoughts. It kind of makes different parts of the brain that don't normally talk to each other kind of talk to each other. And this can lead to all kinds of mind-blowing shower thoughts. It can also lead to paranoia. Now, CBD is often called non-psychoactive because it doesn't get you high, but it does actually have some psychoactive components, mostly anti-seizure and anti-anxiety properties. This basically works the opposite of THC. Instead of activating the CB1 pathway, it actually blocks it. So, you know, if you have a strain of cannabis that's pretty even in between the THC and CBD concentrations, it can produce a more mellow effect, but if the THC is significantly higher, it can be much more intense and produce more paranoia. Cannabinoids are processed in the liver as well, but they don't seem to damage it in the way that alcohol does. In fact, in a 2018 study, they actually showed that it might actually help prevent damage from alcohol to the liver. Yeah, they studied people who abused alcohol, and apparently the ones who also regularly used cannabis had less damage to the liver, even though they had worse diets. And this may be related to THC's anti-inflammatory effects, but it's too early to say. So that's how each of these works. So let's look at the pros and cons. Alcohol pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. Are there any pros to drinking alcohol? The answer to that is a solid... There have been a rash of studies that have come out, you've probably seen them all over social media, claiming that moderate alcohol use, especially red wine, can actually be good for you. It's been linked to increased levels of HDL, which is the good cholesterol, lower cases of heart disease, lower blood pressure, less chance for blood clotting, and a higher insulin sensitivity. In fact, several studies have said that moderate drinking actually improves your lifespan over people who drink heavily and people who don't drink at all. Studies like this, of course, get a whole lot of attention, which is why you see them all over social media, but some people discount them a little bit because they say it's really more correlation and not causation. There might be some external factors involved that make all the difference. You know, for example, red wine drinkers might eat more vegetables, that kind of thing. But the studies are there. It might have some mild health benefits. The cons to alcohol, well, you could die. That's a pretty bad con. Every time you step up to a bar, you are consuming a substance that will stop your breathing if you drink enough of it. Yeah, it would take a lot to make that happen, but it happens every day. Alcohol can exacerbate the risk of cancers, especially liver cancer, and especially if you're already at risk for cancers. Heavy alcohol use is connected to impaired cognitive ability and smaller brain size. And obviously, drinking and driving kills people. 29 a day, according to the CDC. That's 10,500 or 3 9/11s every year. The pros of cannabis can be difficult to suss out because pro-cannabis people can be a little bit over the top in their assumptions. Honestly, it's one of the main problems with cannabis being taken seriously is that one of the pro-cannabis people claim that it can do everything from curing cancer to stopping Alzheimer's. And yes, there are tons of anecdotal evidence for that kind of thing, but no hard studies have been done on it. But there was a 2017 study by the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine that touted the anti-seizure effects of CBD and the anti-inflammatory effects of THC. This study also proposed lifting the ban on cannabis research because, you know, it's a nice little catch-22. It's kind of hard to prove that something has a medical use when it's classified in such a way that prevents you from researching it because they say it has no medical use. I should point out, though, that the FDA has approved the use of 3 different drugs that are based on cannabis. One is called Epidiolex, which is basically CBD, and then there's dronabinol and nabilone, which are synthetic versions of THC. So yeah, the 2 main components of this drug are available by prescription from Big Pharma, but the plant that you could just grow in the backyard is illegal because apparently it has no medical use. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Cannabis, of course, helps in promoting appetite and curbing nausea for cancer patients, and it has some pain management abilities. The biggest pro from cannabis, though, I would say, is that it can't kill you, unlike alcohol. But that doesn't mean that cannabis is without risk. Marijuana smoke, for example, has trace amounts of the same carcinogens that tobacco has, and it can also irritate your lungs. There have been studies linking cannabis use to schizophrenia, and it's especially discouraged for people under the age of 25 because your brain is still developing at that time and it can cause developmental issues. High driving is a problem. It doesn't kill as many people as drunk driving does. Of course, a lot more people drink than smoke, but some people claim that they actually drive better when they're high, but still, don't drive high. And while it's not physically addictive like heroin or alcohol can be, it is psychologically addictive, although really anything is psychologically addictive when it comes down to it. The bottom line is there just needs to be a lot more research done into cannabis so we have a better understanding of these things. So much of what we know about it is anecdotal, and we just need to have some actual studies done. So, should cannabis be legalized? Longtime viewers of this channel know that I rarely take a hard stance on anything. I tend to just kind of put the facts out there and let them fall where they may. But when it comes to this topic, yeah, I'm going to draw a line in the sand and say, yes, I think it should be legalized. Or at the very least, decriminalized. I just don't see how you can categorize a drug as Schedule I and claim that it has no medical uses and then put out pharmaceutical prescription drugs with the exact same components in it because it has medical use. And pretty much all the arguments against cannabis apply just the same to alcohol, and alcohol is available everywhere you go. Of course, like everything, it comes down to money. The alcohol industry is huge and vast, they make billions of dollars, and they fund congressional campaigns. $30 million was spent by that industry in 2018. And these efforts aren't just to make laws more lenient for alcohol companies, it also is to discourage competition, like cannabis. The good news here is that the money thing goes both ways. As cannabis has been legalized in different states, lots of investment money has been pouring into this, so they're gonna have a little bit of lobbying muscle themselves. And one more thing, I just want to touch on this a little bit. It could be a whole rabbit hole on its own, but there's the whole criminal justice side of this. So many lives have been ruined by going to prison for minor drug offenses related to marijuana, and then that gets exacerbated by the private prison system, which has a profit motive involved. It gets pretty convoluted, but the bottom line is 10 states have now legalized cannabis, and they have not descended into some kind of Mad Max hellscape. In fact, Colorado and Washington have now been at it for 5 years, and Colorado just released a 5-year report that I'll put the link to down in the description below. Some of the results should be expected. ER visits involving cannabis has gone up, usually from cannabis-related injuries while people were high, or some people just took too much and got scared and went to the ER. But I should point out that you can usually find a few drunk people in the ER as well. The number of citations for high driving went up, of course, and the number of fatal accidents involving cannabis peaked at 52 in 2016. But again, 29 a day from alcohol. Interestingly, use amongst high school students actually went down over those 5 years and graduation rates went up. It's kind of a weird mixed bag, but when it comes down to it, legalizing cannabis did not lead to the downfall of society. It did, however, lead to almost $1 billion in tax revenue, which got put toward things that definitely benefited society, like homeless shelters, scholarship funds, and small business grants. So my opinion, for what it's worth, is yeah, it's time to legalize it. Or at least decriminalize it. Or at the very least, remove it from the list of Schedule I drugs because it clearly has some medicinal use. This is obviously a very highly charged topic. I'm sure many of you have opinions out there that you would like to share. I invite you to do so politely in the comments down below. T-shirts is always available in the store at answerswithjoe.com/shirts. They are fun, they are eye-catching, and you will like them. They're also soft. I never talked about that. These are really soft shirts. You should get one if you like it. Please. Answerswithjoe.com/shirts. Please like and share this video if you liked it, especially if you want to get this message out there. And if this is your first time here, I invite you to check out this video. Google thinks you'll like that, or any of the other videos that they might be sharing of mine on the side over there. And if you like those, I invite you to subscribe. I do videos every Monday and every Thursday. All right, thanks again for watching. Go out there now, have an eye-opening rest of the week, and I'll see you on Monday. Love you guys. Take care.